Imagine this. A prison guard carries what he thinks is just another shipping container. It's heavy, it's sealed, it's supposed to be carrying nothing but factory supplies. But inside that crate is a man, and not just any man. A convicted murderer who has just pulled off one of the most unbelievable prison escapes in modern history. This is the story of Richard Lee McNair, the killer who didn't just break out of prison. He talked his way out, ran his way out, and literally mailed himself out. To understand how a man could mail himself out of a federal prison, you first have to understand the man they were trying to lock in, because before Richard Lee McNair was a legend on the U.S. Marshal's most wanted list, he was Sergeant Richard Lee McNair of the United States Air Force. And the story of how he got from that respected position to a life sentence for murder is where this whole bizarre saga truly begins. On the surface, McNair's background reads like a classic all-American story. He was born in Duncan, Oklahoma, and by all accounts, he was a bright, capable kid. His own family described him as someone who never got into trouble. Perhaps most ironically, his father was a reserve police sergeant, meaning McNair grew up seeing the justice system from the inside, on the side of the law. He was intelligent, a bit of a loner, but he channeled that into a disciplined career. He joined the Air Force and excelled, rising to the rank of sergeant and being stationed at the Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota. This wasn't a man who fell through the cracks. This was a man who succeeded within a system of rigid rules and authority. He was trusted, respected, and seen as a model serviceman, but beneath that polished military exterior, a dark and violent current was flowing. Something was building, and on the cold night of November 17th, 1987, it finally broke the surface in a place you'd least expect it, a grain elevator on the quiet plains of North Dakota. McNair had decided to burgle the Farmers Union Co-op grain elevator just outside Minot. Armed and operating under the cover of darkness, he broke into the facility's office. But the plan went wrong almost immediately. He wasn't alone. 2 employees were working late that night. One was a 38-year-old truck driver named Richard Kitzman. The other was an office worker named Jerome Theus. They stumbled upon McNair in the middle of his crime. Now, a typical burglar might run, but McNair was not a typical burglar. He confronted them. Without hesitation, he raised his pistol and shot Jerome Theus 4 times, leaving him critically wounded on the floor. Then, he turned his gun on Richard Kitzman. He shot and killed him. McNair grabbed what cash he could and fled, believing he had left no witnesses to his crime. He had committed a robbery, an attempted murder, and a murder, all in a matter of minutes. In his mind, the loose ends were tied up. He was wrong. Jerome Theus, against all odds, survived. Bleeding from 4 gunshot wounds, he managed to get help, and crucially, he was able to give police a description of his attacker. He described a clean-cut, confident, military-looking man. For investigators in Minot, that description, combined with the proximity to the massive Air Force base, was a huge lead. They began looking at personnel stationed there. The police work was methodical. They followed leads, and soon, suspicion fell on Sergeant Richard Lee McNair. When detectives arrived at McNair's off-base rental to question him, they were met not with a panicked suspect, but with a cool, calm, and collected Air Force sergeant. He denied everything. He was composed, articulate, and seemed almost impossible to rattle. It was the first glimpse the world would get of McNair's incredible ability to lie under pressure. But the evidence was mounting, and the most powerful evidence of all was Jerome Theus. When he identified Richard Lee McNair as the man who shot him and killed his co-worker, the case was sealed. Sergeant McNair was arrested and taken to the Ward County Jail in Minot. For the authorities, it was case closed. A violent, senseless crime committed by a man who should have known better. But for Richard McNair, sitting in that county jail, this wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning of his real obsession, the art of the escape. It's February 1988. Richard McNair is not yet in a prison. He's in an interrogation room at the Minot Police Department. To the 3 detectives guarding him, the situation is under control. Their suspect is a former Air Force sergeant, but now he's just a man in a chair, one wrist locked down by a set of steel handcuffs. The case is closed. But what they failed to understand is that Richard McNair's mind never stopped working. He was a master of observation, constantly scanning his environment, not for comfort, but for weaknesses. He wasn't thinking about his life sentence. He was thinking about the next 5 minutes. He was looking for a tool. And in that sterile, secure room, he found the most harmless, everyday object imaginable. A tube of lip balm. This wasn't a long-conceived plan. This was pure improvisation, a flash of criminal genius. McNair complained to the detectives that his lips were chapped. It's a simple, human complaint. In a long, dry interrogation, it's completely believable. One of the detectives, likely seeing no harm in it, handed him a tube. McNair casually applied it to his lips, but his real work was happening out of their direct line of sight. With subtle movements, he began squeezing out the waxy substance and coating his cuffed hand and wrist. He was creating a greasy, invisible lubricant right under the noses of his guards. He was turning their small act of decency into the key to his own escape. He waited. He watched the detectives, looking for a moment of distraction, a phone call, a shift in conversation, a glance away. He knew he'd only get one shot at this. Then the moment came. The detectives were distracted. In one swift, painful motion, McNair contorted his hand and wrenched it against the steel. The lip balm did its job. He slipped the cuff. Before the officers could even register what was happening, McNair exploded from the chair. He was a blur of motion, bolting for the door and out into the hallways of the police station itself. A frantic, chaotic chase began, with alarms sounding and officers scrambling. He was a fugitive inside the very building meant to hold him. He sprinted up a stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time, with the sounds of pursuit echoing behind him. He reached the 3rd floor and burst through a door, only to find himself trapped. There was nowhere else to run. Below him was a significant drop to the ground. For any sane person, this was the end. But McNair made a desperate gamble. He chose the fall over the cuffs. He leapt from the 3rd-story window. He hit the ground hard, but the adrenaline was pumping. He scrambled to his feet and kept running, vanishing into the surrounding neighborhood. For a few frantic hours, he was free. A massive search immediately locked down the area. McNair, desperate for cover, found a hiding spot in a nearby residential yard. He climbed a large tree, concealing himself in the dense branches as police swarmed the streets below him. The tree was surrounded. With no other options and nowhere else to go, Richard McNair was forced to surrender. This first escape was, by all measures, a spectacular failure. It lasted only a few hours and ended with him stuck up a tree. But it was also a profound statement of intent. It proved that no wall, no cuff, and no guard could make him accept his confinement. He would rather risk a 3-story fall for a few hours of freedom than stay in a chair for 1 more minute. He was caught, yes, but for McNair, this wasn't an end. It was a lesson. The next time he wouldn't rely on impulse. He would be patient, he would be meticulous, and he would be much, much more successful. After the failed lip balm escape, Richard McNair was sent to the North Dakota State Penitentiary in Bismarck. This wasn't a county jail. This was a maximum security facility, a place of concrete and steel designed to hold the state's most violent offenders. For the authorities, McNair was now exactly where he belonged. For the next 4 years, he became a model prisoner. He was quiet, followed the rules, and never caused trouble. He gave the guards no reason to watch him any closer than the hundreds of other inmates doing their time. But this quiet obedience was a mask. Behind it, McNair was doing what he always did, observing, waiting, and planning. He had learned from his impulsive failure. This time, there would be no mad dash. This escape would be a slow, calculated masterpiece of patience. McNair's target wasn't a handcuff, it was the prison's anatomy. He and 2 other inmates, after years of watching guard patrols and studying the building's routines, identified a potential weakness: the ventilation system. It was a classic escape route, something you see in movies, but they believed they could make it a reality. This was a long and dangerous project. Using makeshift tools, they began the painstaking process of chipping away at the concrete wall surrounding an air vent. This wasn't a single night's work. This took months of secret, careful labor. Every chip of concrete had to be hidden. Every sound had to be muffled. A single mistake, a single discovery, would land them in solitary confinement for years and end their plan forever. They were gambling everything on this claustrophobic crawl space. Finally, in October of 1992, they were ready. The hole was big enough. The time was right. McNair, being the slimmest of the 3, was the designated point man. He was the first to go. Imagine the moment. He squeezed his body into the crushing darkness of the ventilation shaft. This wasn't a quick shimmy. This was a grueling, claustrophobic crawl through the metal guts of the prison. The air was thick with dust and grime. The only sounds were his own breathing and the scraping of his body against the metal. He was navigating a dark, unknown maze, with the constant fear that a wrong turn could lead to a dead end, trapping him inside the walls forever. He painstakingly made his way through the shafts, emerging onto the roof of a lower-level building still inside the prison's main perimeter. From there, under the cover of darkness, he navigated the final obstacles and slipped over the wall. He was out. This time, McNair didn't get caught in a tree after a few hours. He vanished. He had learned his lesson. Escaping the prison was only the first step. The second, more crucial step was escaping his own identity. He immediately bleached his hair blonde, grew out a beard, and began using a series of aliases. He became a ghost, drifting across the American Midwest. For 10 months, he lived in the shadows, taking on odd jobs, and never staying in one place for too long. He had successfully broken out of a maximum security prison and assimilated back into the world. His run finally came to an end in July of 1993. A police officer in Grand Island, Nebraska, spotted him in a stolen car, leading to his recapture. But he had proven his point. He was no longer an amateur. He was a patient, meticulous, and highly capable fugitive. The justice system was furious. For his escape, another 30 years were added to his 2 life sentences. The state of North Dakota decided he was too great a risk to hold. So, they made a decision that would ironically set the stage for his most legendary feat. They handed him over to the federal prison system. McNair was sent into the world of federal Supermax facilities, the most secure prisons in the United States. This is where the story should have ended, in a concrete box from which no one was thought to escape. But for Richard McNair, being sent to the big leagues just meant the challenge was bigger, and the escape would have to be even more brilliant. After being handed over to the federal system, Richard McNair was eventually transferred to the United States Penitentiary in Pallet, Louisiana. This is the big leagues, a modern, high-security fortress of concrete and electronics filled with the country's most dangerous criminals. USP Pollock was designed with one purpose in mind: to be escape-proof. Inside, McNair was assigned a job, a mundane, repetitive, mind-numbing job. He worked in the prison's industry building, repairing old, torn mailbags. For hours a day, he would sit and stitch, surrounded by massive piles of canvas. To the guards, he was just another lifer, quietly doing his time. Inmate number 13, 1829-045. But McNair wasn't just stitching bags. He was studying a system. He saw the pallets, stacked high with finished bags, wrapped in plastic, and loaded onto trucks by forklift. And in this routine, this monotonous flow of goods, moving from inside the prison to the outside world, he saw it. A blind spot, a flaw in the escape-proof fortress. He wasn't going to break out of this prison. He was going to let the prison ship him out. This was McNair's masterpiece, the culmination of everything he had learned from his previous escapes. It was a plan of incredible audacity and meticulous detail. He spent months, possibly years, observing the shipping procedures from the mailbag workshop. He knew he couldn't just hide in a pile of bags. He'd be crushed or discovered. He needed a custom-built escape pod. So he got to work. He managed to get his hands on a discarded shipping pallet, and, in secret, he hollowed it out from the bottom, creating a shallow, coffin-like compartment. It was just big enough for him to lie flat inside. He also constructed a small escape kit, the most crucial piece of which was a simple breathing tube, like a snorkel, that he could snake up through the mailbags to get air. On April 5th, 2006, he decided it was time. The plan relied on perfect timing and the help of a few other inmates. As the workday was ending, McNair slipped into his pre-built coffin on the pallet. His accomplices then stacked the heavy mailbags on top of him, completely concealing the compartment. They snaked his breathing tube up towards the top, and then, using the prison's own equipment, they shrink-wrapped the entire pallet. He was sealed in. Imagine it. Total crushing darkness. The weight of hundreds of pounds of canvas pressing down on you. Your only connection to the outside world is a flimsy tube for air. All you can do is lie there, heart pounding, and wait. He would have heard the muffled sounds of the prison warehouse. Then, the sound he was waiting for, the rumble and beep of a forklift. He felt the pallet being lifted, the jarring movement as it was transported and loaded onto a delivery truck. The truck's doors slammed shut. The engine roared to life, and then he felt the vehicle begin to move. He was out. He had successfully breached the walls of a federal penitentiary without a single guard knowing he was gone. But he was still trapped in a box. Hours later, after being dropped at a nearby warehouse, McNair cut himself free. He was free, wearing his prison-issue clothes, in the middle of Louisiana. And this is where the story becomes truly legendary. Later that same day, McNair is jogging along a set of railroad tracks in Alexandria, Louisiana. He's trying to put distance between himself and the prison. A police car pulls up. The officer inside is Carl Bordelon. The prison had just reported the escape, and Bordelon was on patrol, looking for a man in a prison uniform. The entire 10-minute conversation was captured on Officer Bordelon's Dashcam, and it is a masterclass in deception. McNair, calling himself Robert Jones, is unbelievably calm. He jokes with the officer. He has a perfect cover story. He's a roofer named Jimmy, in town doing repairs after Hurricane Katrina. He says his buddies call him Jimmy Jones.
Is he you live around here, buddy? No. Where you live at?
Down the road by Pineville.
Pineville?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Do you have any form of identification on you?
No, man.
What's your name?
Robert Jones.
Robert Jones?
Uh-huh. Why, I'm not supposed to be on the tracks?
No, that's not the problem right now. What's your address?
I don't have an address. I'm at the hotel. We're working on houses and stuff like that, the roofing.
Roofing?
Yep.
Okay.
For my brother.
All right. What is, we got an escapee.
Oh, shit.
McNair, on Dashcam video. You know, I'm just jogging through. I'm from the area, just trying to get back in shape. He builds rapport. He's friendly, non-threatening, and completely believable. At one point, you can hear the radio in Bordelon's car describing the escaped inmate, and McNair doesn't even flinch. He just keeps talking, smiling, and steering the conversation. After 10 minutes, Officer Bordelon is convinced. He tells Jimmy to be safe and drives away. Richard McNair, a convicted murderer who had escaped from a federal prison just hours earlier, literally talked his way out of being captured.
Pollock Federal Penitentiary nearly 3 years ago by hiding out under a stack of mail and essentially being delivered to freedom.
McNair was now one of the most wanted men in America. He was placed on the U.S. Marshal's 15 Most Wanted list. His story was on every news channel. Yet, he vanished again. He traveled across the country and, in 2007, he crossed the border into Canada. He lived on the run for 18 months. He stole vehicles, adopted new aliases, and once again, melted into society. His luck finally ran out on October 25th, 2007. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police in New Brunswick spotted him in a suspicious-looking stolen van. After a short chase, they cornered him. Surrounded and with nowhere left to run, Richard Lee McNair, the man who never stopped fighting his confinement, finally gave up. Today, Richard Lee McNair is locked away in ADX Florence, the Supermax prison in Colorado. It is the most secure federal prison in the United States, a place designed to hold people the system can't hold anywhere else. His life of escapes is over.